Hello again and welcome back to our course on PowerPoint 2013. In this section we're going to start to look at putting pictures into your presentations. If you've used PowerPoint before in an earlier version, even quite a recent version, you'll find that in PowerPoint 2013 the way that this works has changed quite fundamentally in one or two areas, so it's probably worth paying attention to this section and the next one just to see the scale and nature of those changes. What I'm going to do first in this section is to show you some of the most straightforward ways that you can include pictures, and I'm going to put some pictures into the presentation we've been looking at on the way that the UK Parliament works. Now, when you come to do an exercise later on in the course, you may want to apply the same principle to a description of how your own government works or how an organisation that you know of or are involved in works. So, let's put some pictures into this presentation. So first of all, I've got the title slide here, the UK Parliament, an overview. Let me insert a slide after this one. If I go to the Home tab and click on New Slide, one of the layouts that's available to me is Title and Content. So let me first of all put that one in. And that lets me put in text as we saw before. By default we get a bullet point, but I also mentioned that we can put in here any one of a number of other types of object. Insert table, insert chart, smart art graphic, video. One of those options is online pictures. So what I want to do now is to click on online pictures. Now when I click on online pictures I get this dialog, and this really gives me three options. One option is to insert clip art from office.com. There's a very important note there, royalty-free photos and illustrations. I'll come back to that in just a moment. The other option is to do a Bing image search the web. Another one is to go to my SkyDrive and use an image from there. Now, one of the things you need to be very aware of when you're preparing presentations is copyright and royalty issues. I'm certainly not going to go into those at length here, but you should be aware that most of the material that you can acquire online will be subject to some kind of copyright or royalties. If you're only ever going to look at it on your own computer, I guess nobody else is going to find out about it. But if you're going to publish a presentation or give a presentation in public, other people may see an image, you need to be aware of the consequences of breaching somebody else's copyright or not paying somebody else royalties on the use of their photos and illustrations. Now clearly the material I may have in these three situations can be very different. If I've got my own photos on my SkyDrive, I may own copyright on those. There's absolutely no problem including those in my presentations. If I do a search, Bing image search, let's suppose I did a Bing image search on Parliament. Type in the word Parliament and click on the search button. Then with PowerPoint 2013 what happens is you get results that are images licensed under Creative Commons. Now Creative Commons really comes in a number of different versions, and depending on which version of the Creative Commons license agreement a particular image has operating on it, you may or may not be able to use that image. Now you need to check what the conditions are for any particular image, and then if you plan to use that you need to make sure obviously that you satisfy those conditions. If you go outside Creative Commons, and you do that by clicking here Show All Web Results, you'll get even bigger selection of images to choose from, and you're going to need to be even more careful about copyright and royalty issues. In many cases you'll get images on a search which will be available from one of the commercial image sources who will charge you a certain amount of money to use one of their images. It may be just a flat fee, it may be related to how you're going to use it or for how long you're going to use it. In the case of the Creative Commons one here for Parliament, and bear in mind this isn't just the UK Parliament, this will be any Parliament around the world, there are over 47,000 available images. If I did a search on the whole of the web, I'm sure there would be many times that many. But there are almost always many images available for any purpose that you might want to use it, but you need to be careful about those copyright and royalty issues. Now, in the case of Office.com clip art, the story is a little bit different in that Microsoft, as you can see there, make the point that it's royalty free. There are conditions associated with using these images to do with you owning valid and legitimate Microsoft licenses. Again, I'm not going to go into those now, you need to check those yourself, but once you're sure that you've satisfied those conditions, you can use what's called the Office.com clip art. Clip art used to be thought of purely as cartoons, but nowadays clip art includes photographic images as well. So let's find some clip art for Parliament. So again, type in the term into that box and click on the search button. And I've found some clip art. Let me try to find a picture of the Houses of Parliament. Well, there we are, there's one. All I need to do is to select it. I can either double click or I can click on insert, and that image is inserted into my slide. I could then, of course, for instance, just type in a heading for it. And then let me just center align that heading within its title box. I could actually make the title text box smaller on this particular slide. And that'll enable me to make the photograph itself bigger, which we'll come back to in just a moment. Now, there are a couple of things to point out here. One of them is that inserting an image pretty much is what you've just seen happen. It's a very straightforward process. Whatever the source of the image, it really involves more work than that, but choosing an image is another matter altogether. For example, very often the images that are available tend to be of that fairly square 4:3 type of size, and the presentation we've got here is a 16:9 size of presentation. So where you've got a widescreen presentation, you maybe need to use those squarer types of image a little bit more carefully. Again, I'll come back to that point in a moment. The other point to make here, although this is more to do with actually giving the presentation, is that I might at this point switch on the notes, go View Panel, stick on the notes pane, and actually type in now some notes about what I'm going to say in my presentation at this point. So, the British Houses of Parliament, and then maybe talk about that picture and the sort of image that it conjures up before we get into the relatively dry subject of the presentation. Now, of course, at this point generally I might put some much more detailed notes there and talk about the River Thames and whatever. So this is a good way of, if you like, prompting yourself in the presentation, and having those notes written and have thought about what you're going to say is a great way of making sure that your presentation goes well. So let me now go to the third slide, the one that says the House of Commons. And you may recall that we created this from a layout which we've used on a couple of slides. What I want to do now is to change that layout. Layout, title and content was the one that was used. I'm now going to change that to be to content. Now note that I've still got a title area at the top, but I've now got two content areas. Watch carefully what happens. When I've got two content areas, the text that occupies the only content area on the original layout now occupies the first content area here, and the second content area is empty. So if I now go into this second one, hover over and choose Online Pictures, I'm now going to search in there again on Parliament. I could even use the same picture if I wanted to. Let's see if there's one that I prefer. I think I might choose that one. Click on Insert. And you see that what's happened here is that I've used a different shape of picture alongside the text to go with this presentation. Now, that isn't actually a picture of the House of Commons, it's a picture of Big Ben. But I'm sure you can see the general idea there of incorporating an image on the same slide as we've got some bullet text as well. And also the way that I've changed the layout of this slide from a slide with just title and content to a slide with title and two pieces of content. Now there are another couple of options for inserting pictures into a presentation. I'm going to come back to those a little bit later on. I'm going to look at the general pictures and then at photo album later on. But in the next section I want to take a look at formatting the pictures we've inserted into this presentation already. So please join me for that.